We're going to get started with just a little overview of the Making Sense project and then dive in with our guest presenter, Martha Rush, and share with you at the end some evaluation information. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Making Sense project, this is an ongoing partnership between the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Penn State University, and part of an overall series of financial literacy and economic education initiatives. If you haven't been to our website in a while, I invite you to go and visit the website. We are proud to have just released a brand new version with all sorts of new information and resources and tools, and we'd love to have you visit that, give us some feedback on what you find there. We'll be doing some more with that as we go forward this spring as well. In addition, we are making a concerted effort to try and support teachers where a lot of folks have gone for support, especially in the last year or two, which is Facebook. It's where a lot of us spend our time scrolling and using it as now a source of professional development and information sharing and what have you. So if you haven't already joined the Facebook group, if you're online, search for makingsensepa.org. And I believe, Kevin, if you've got the link to that, if you don't mind sharing that out, that would be fantastic. You can go ahead and go in there and ask to join. We would love to welcome you to the Facebook group and have you join us as part of that group. This evening's webinar is one of our ongoing series. So we always try and do one of three things, or more than one in some cases, within these three pillars: enhancing content knowledge, highlighting financial literacy resources, and sharing professional information. And I would say we're going to focus in here over on the right side of that this evening. We do have some other upcoming webinars, so on our website you can sign up for any of these other additional upcoming webinars. Next Wednesday we're doing one on the new national standards in personal financial education. Those are now, there used to be two sets of standards, one from Jumpstart, one from the Council on Economic Education. There is now one set of standards. We'll be talking about that, what changed, and how that, what that looks like in terms of crosswalking those against the Pennsylvania standards in economics, family consumer science, business, computer information technology, and career education and work. So join us next week for that fun and exciting discussion about standards. The following week, our following webinar on February 9th, we will be talking about closing the wealth gap and what role financial education might be able to play. We'll be talking about some data from the Federal Reserve Bank and other resources that would be can be useful to you, and encourage you to sort of give you some thought into some different things that you approach in your classroom. And then on February 23rd, we have a session with folks from University of Chicago talking about their FinEdge program, which is a research-backed financial education program by the same group that has done a lot of work in the area of mathematics. The folks that did everyday math are also part of the work that's been done to launch FinEdge, again, from that research-based approach to teaching. So those are some ones that I'd encourage you to sign up for, and look forward to having you engaged in those. I'd love it if everybody would find and open the chat area. So go ahead and just click on the chat button so you can see the running chat going throughout the session. Take a moment, if you will, to introduce yourselves. Make sure you choose in that little drop-down bar that everyone, so that everybody who's in the virtual room with us can see who else is here, and share and engage with each other. This evening, I'm going to be offering up some books that as a sort of giveaway, if you will. And in order to do that, I'm going to ask all of you to participate in that chat function. I'll talk about that here, so I'll skip to that one for a second. So in order to qualify for that, I'm going to ask that you participate over there in the chat. Either connect a strategy, as Martha talks about it, to a lesson or resource that you've used. If you can, be as specific as possible, not just like I've used, next gen personal finance, talk to about the specific resource you've used. Request a strategy. Maybe there's something that you'd like us to do some digging into, or create something that maybe doesn't exist. I think there's still some gaps in the world of financial education, even though there's so much other great stuff out there. There's still room that we can, room for improvement, or ask a substantive question or provide a substantive comment. So those are your entries, if you will, into our giveaway. And I'd encourage you, and thank you, everybody. I'll catch up in a second here. I see the chat going with everybody introducing themselves. So thank you already for doing that. So with that, let's dive into our content for tonight. Beat Boredom, Engaging Tuned Out Teenagers. It happens to be the title of Martha Rush's book, which I have here on my desk. Martha and I have known each other, we think, for about 10 years, I think. We met back in many years ago at a training of writers program that was being done by the Federal Reserve Bank at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis in cooperation with the Council on Economic Education. She and I were on a team that was developing materials for the council on mathematics in the real world. And those actually are on the Econ EdLink website. You can find some of those resources. They've launched Nearpod versions of those lessons, some neat, cool stuff recently. So anyhow, and she and I have encountered each other a number of different times in different projects. I was just telling Kevin a moment ago that we also did our graduate work recently with a graduate program at the University of Pennsylvania in subsequent cohorts there in education entrepreneurship. So Martha's just a fantastic educator, somebody who I really admire, and I've enjoyed reading her book. It's very much based in research and personal experience and interviews. I appreciate her background as a journalist and the perspective that she brings to things. So as you keep going, or as you're going and listening, Kevin's going to shoot out a link here in a second to if he hasn't already, if I didn't miss it, to this handout. This is in Google Docs, so it'll force you to create a copy for yourself so you can type on it. And it has on the second page of it all of the links that Martha will be sharing, or most of them that she'll be sharing throughout the session today. So without further ado, I would love to turn it over to you, Martha. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you share yours.
Thank you. I saw briefly while you were talking, somebody raised their hand, but I'm not sure who it was, and I missed it. So I don't know if there's a question you want to address before I jump in.
I haven't seen one, but if someone has one, hit us up with it. I will be monitoring the chat as we go along.
Perfect.
And
thank you.
If there's anything dire, I will unmute myself and ask Martha. But love to see some healthy conversation going over there in the sidebar today. So,
excellent.
Martha, with that, I'll turn myself off so that they can focus on you.
Okay, thank you again, Hillary. It's so much fun to listen to this whole introduction because you guys have so much great stuff going on for teachers in Pennsylvania. So that's really very, very exciting. And I'm very honored to be asked to be here. So thank you for introducing me again. I'll just give a quick overview of me here. There's my, you have on the handout that Hillary made, you have a link to my LinkedIn, and you can find me if you want to. So I've been teaching Minnesota for 25 years, a whole variety of things, like probably many of you, and have a couple kids, do a lot of curriculum writing. I teach part-time right now, so I'm what's considered 0.6 in my district, so 3 classes out of the 5 on a daily basis. Also do a lot of workshops, developing a whole variety of materials. I'm really most interested in being able to do like inquiry lessons and problem-based learning lessons right now. So that's what I've been working on a lot. So anyway, thank you for this opportunity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategies that I identified in that book. So let's go ahead and get to that. You'll notice that I'm going to probably be talking kind of fast, although I'm not sure I'm all that much faster than Hillary. But I do tend to talk fast, and I packed a lot into these slides. So please do feel free, though, to put questions in the chat or follow up with a question later. Okay, so a couple things from the book and from my consulting business, which is called Never Bore. And that is, I got really interested actually in the grad school program that Hillary was talking about, in this issue of boredom, of kids just, and I don't mean like a little bit of boredom or, the sort of need to constantly occupy oneself, but that really being checked out. right? Like a kid who's just not connected because they don't find meaning in what's going on in school. They're not engaged. And so, I'm a believer that a little bit of boredom is a good thing, right? Because kids don't need to be entertained all the time, but being truly bored in class to the point where you're not paying attention is definitely not good for kids learning. So I was really interested. I did a survey of about 1,000 students and also talked to a lot of teachers. And there's when a kid is not successful, when a child is not successful in school, very often as the teachers, we see that student as unmotivated, not engaged. They don't care. They're not working hard. But if you talk to the student, they say, well, my teacher is not very engaging. My teacher is not very interesting. And so I thought it was interesting to look at those two perspectives. And so I made this little table thinking about the fact that, there's not just those two, but there's really, there's highly engaging, moderately, and not engaging for teachers, and there's highly motivated, moderately motivated, and not very motivated for students, right? So we have all these possible combinations in the classroom, and of course, if we're highly engaging and the kid's highly motivated, then that's a win-win. But if the student is not very motivated and our instruction isn't very engaging, then that's really unlikely to be successful. And I also thought about this a lot and thought, it's really important for us to control what we can. So I would never make the claim that if you adopt specific strategies, you are going to get every student to be engaged. But I think the goal for me is move as much from this right column to the left one, right? The more engaging I can be, the more kids that I'm going to be able to bring along. So that's kind of been my focus. And my philosophy around this is, yes, I'd love to engage every single student. It's hard, but I'm going to try to engage as many of them as I can, knowing that especially these kids in the middle can really go either way, depending on how excited and interested they feel in a class. So as Hillary mentioned, I did reflect a lot on my own teaching career. I also sat in classrooms with some masterful teachers in a variety of disciplines and in different states. And I also did a ton of research into strategies. And these are the 6 that I settled on. So number 1, storytelling, which is something I think as teachers, we all really love to do. But sometimes, in the era of PowerPoint, we forget and we turn things into facts and bullet points and try to be really efficient and just relay that, and we lose the narrative of the story that makes what we're teaching so interesting to kids. So bringing back as much narrative, making things about people, I think that's, for me, that's really, really important. Discussion and debate. There's a lot of research that suggests that when kids talk, they learn more. And it's not just correlational, that if you can get a student who is reluctant to actually speak in class, they actually learn more by doing so, because it's inherently engaging. When you're talking and you're arguing and you're sharing something, your brain is focused on what's going on in the classroom. The third one is simulation, which is probably my personal favorite, just because I love so much having kids in role plays, having kids in like production simulations, or doing auctions, or doing other kinds of online simulations that really give them sort of more complete experience, where they really feel like they're experiencing whatever the concept is they're being taught. Okay, bottom row, problem solving. This one we'll talk more about this evening, but this idea of giving kids problems that we don't know the answer to, right? Rather than teaching them strategies and saying, okay, go apply this to the problem. Giving them problems and then saying, okay, work collaboratively, come up with your best solution, share it with the class. So problem solving is probably the one that I think is the most important for a variety of reasons, primarily because it teaches so many skills beyond the content. Competition here, I'm talking about, I'm not saying that I have something against doing, say, a Jeopardy game at the end to review, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about really high-level academic competitions that give kids an additional motivation to really reach beyond just what they're learning in class. And then the last one, authentic tasks, and that is basically giving students the opportunity to do real world work. Get involved in an issue or a topic that's of concern to them, teaching something to someone else, some type of involvement in the broader community. Okay, so we're going to look at these in the context of personal finance in just a moment. Why are these strategies important? Well, number one, there's tons of research that shows that active learning is much more effective for teaching kids things for the long term. They can listen, they can cram, they can pass a test in the short term, but for things that they're actually going to remember and be able to apply later, active learning is a lot more effective. Second of all, I like to go out there and talk about this because I know, having been a teacher for 25 plus years, that we all want to be that. We all want to be doing that, right? But it's so hard to sort of push ourselves to be doing that on a regular basis. Most research shows that about 80% of classroom instruction in high schools is lecture and teacher talk, teacher directed. Students are passive recipients. When it comes to like discussion, one of the big research studies I read showed that in English classrooms, discussion was 5% of the time. So just a couple minutes out of each class period was there really a hearty, open discussion where kids got to share their perspectives. So, I've had to push myself in my research and when I wrote the book to not just think these things, but to make sure I'm actually making a part of practice every day. 21st century skills, I think, that can be, sometimes you hear so much about it, you think, oh, I'm tired of hearing about it, but so much in the future workplace is going to be problem solving, collaboration, communication. And high engagement strategies teach those things along with the content. Those same skills are brought up when it comes to what's called global competence. And also especially that communication and the ability to communicate across cultures. And then speaking of cultures, culturally relevant teaching as well. And I'm not going to go to that link right now. I know Hillary gave you that link, but it goes to a book called Culturally Relevant Teaching and the Brain, which we did a book study on at my school. And I was pleased to see this came out. I don't know what year it came out, 2019 or 2020. I read it, I think, in 2020. And I was really excited to see that the authors, Loretta Hammond, most of her strategies dovetail exactly with the ones that I was talking about in my book. So, that made me really happy to think that, these things that I found successful, she's arguing these are the things that we need to do to engage many of our students who've been disadvantaged. Okay, so personal finance applications. We're going to focus on 4 of the strategies this evening: problem-based learning, authentic tasks, discussion, and simulation. But I'm going to take just a minute first to talk about the 2 that I'm skipping over, so they won't be completely ignored. So the first one is storytelling. This video, which you have a link to, I'm just going to show you like 2.5 minutes of it. The video is from a John Oliver video. The lesson that I found it with is from something called Citizen Math. It used to be called Mathalicious, and it's a lesson. It's basically a math lesson, right? But it's teaching math by basically showing students how the fees for things like parking tickets can build up and become a bigger and bigger burden over time, especially for people who are lower income. So I'm going to share again so that I get the audio, because of course I forgot to do that when I started my sharing the first time. Why wouldn't I? And we're going to go to that video and just watch a few minutes of it. So
she had some low-level traffic tickets, but because she couldn't pay them straight away, she accumulated all kinds of other fees and additional tickets, which, despite her best efforts, she was unable to pay off. And then, one morning, this happened.
I had my grandbaby with me, and I was sitting up giving him breakfast that morning, and I heard a knock on the door, and I seen a police officer at my door. And in the back of my mind, it wasn't for me, because I didn't figure they'd come get you for tickets. I was escorted to jail.
And if you're thinking, how the fuck is it possible for a grandmother to go to jail for traffic tickets? Well, that is what this story is about. Because let's start at the beginning. Most tickets come with a fine, and if you've ever lived paycheck to paycheck, you know that can be difficult. For example, in DeKalb County, Alabama, a speeding ticket is $255.50. If you earn minimum wage there, $7.25 an hour, it would take you more than 35 hours of work to pay that off, which seems harsh because the only justifiable way you should lose an entire week of your life due to speeding is if you hit 88 miles an hour and go back in time. And sometimes governments will take a reasonable base fine and turn it into something that people may not be able to afford, as they've done in California.
The actual fine for running a stop sign is $35, but by the time the state tacks on 10 different surcharges and fees, the amount you owe jumps to $238.
Now, just to put that in perspective, I went on eBay this morning and $238 is the current asking price for this glorious unicorn with wheels on its hooves. So that's right. If you live in California and run a stop sign, you can either pay your ticket or own a unicorn. Now, courts know that not everyone can pay fines straight away, which is why some allow a payment plan. Unfortunately, that can turn out to be even more expensive.
In Illinois, the state adds on 30% if you fall behind in your payments. In New Orleans, it costs you $100 just to sign up for a payment plan.
Yes, your payment plan begins with a payment plan payment. It's like your probation officer is MC Escher. Just go pay the clerk at the top of that endless staircase. You'll be fine. And this situation is widespread. At least 44 states charge people a fee to be on probation, and many municipalities use these charges as a way to fund local services without raising taxes.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. I showed you a little bit more than what I showed earlier because I wanted to get to the part about the fees that are tacked on. But you can see that this story, you know, there's so much math in here, right? And there's so much personal finance in here. And I think, you know, bringing those stories to students gets them hooked and interested. And how is that possible? And then you know, this particular lesson has the students actually like plot and basically use system of equations to figure out how it affects people differently based on their income level. So I'm going to jump on because I didn't want to spend too much time on storytelling, but I just wanted to make note of that and what I mean by that. The second category, which I'm also not going to spend a lot of time on, is competition. And these are just two that I've participated in. And of course, there's a lot more, like including stock market games and other things. Personal finance challenge. This one I'll talk about a little bit more. This is one of my favorites because the personal finance challenge, which is run through CEE nationally, is a case study competition. So very, very open-ended, really includes all the skills like problem solving, collaboration, communication. So I really love that one. And then the budget challenge has gone through a number of different phases, from being free to being really expensive and having different sponsors. But there's a variety of budgeting type of activities. And what's cool about a good one, which this one is that it really puts students in that position, right? The students have a budget, they have various bills coming due, they get questions, they have problems, they have a medical issue, right? All these things come up. It's almost a game playing scenario, highly engaging though. And the students are motivated by wanting to be the best, right? Wanting to do the best in this competition. So those are just a couple of things. Yes, I agree. Kevin put a comment in about this example for check cashing businesses and the unbanked. Absolutely. Yeah, and the whole idea of the payment plan part. So it goes on and really explores that further, and how much more money you end up paying because you're spacing out the payments instead of making the payment right away because you can't afford to. Okay, so let's move on to problem-based learning. This one actually dovetails pretty well with competition because it's similar to the National Personal Finance Challenge. So problem-based learning, the idea is to shift away from, as I said earlier, teaching kids a particular algorithm or strategy and then giving them sort of predictable problems to solve, shifting that focus to wicked problems, meaning problems that don't have any kind of easy solution. This doesn't have to be a lengthy project. It doesn't have to be, a semester project. It doesn't even have to be a week-long project. Kids can do problem-based learning. They can at least dip their toes in it in a class period. So I put a question there: what kinds of wicked problems come up in personal finance? And if you think about it for a minute, you're going to realize so many, right? Because that's why personal finance is a challenge, because there are so many. There's difficult questions, right? Should I pay this? Should I do this? Am I better off buying a house, or am I better off renting and putting the money in the stock market? How much should I save for college? How should I save it for college? How should I finance college, right? Is college worth it? So, so many questions. So one thing that I came up with, actually motivated by preparing my students for the National Personal Finance Challenge, was a set of case studies for problem-based learning. And one of them is included. There's a link that in the information that Hillary sent you. And it's from this set of case studies called No Easy Answers. So this case study, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of it so you can kind of see what it looks like and how it works, and a few of my students' responses to it. So the case studies themselves, there's 10 of these ones. We're just going to look at the should Alex buy a car one. But the first one is about a student making decisions about what classes to take. There's one about choosing which college to go to, choosing your first job, the dreaded benefits meeting, banking. There's all kinds of different things that are all, again, open-ended, no easy answer sorts of problems. So with these lessons, the heart of it is that the students have this case study. So the first one, or this one, the second one, should Alex buy a car? So there's a whole story here. Alex is 18. He lives with his parents and a brother. He's in his second semester, senior year, planning to go to community college or a nearby state university. He has a B average, all kinds of detailed information, what sports he played, why he has conflicts with his parents about using the cars, where he has a job, which is at Dairy Queen, where he could get a better job, which is at an Amazon warehouse, but it's too far away. It's not easy for him to get to. He would need to have a car. Also, his idea that he'd like to have a car for college, because he's not necessarily going to go live on a college campus. He's probably going to be commuting from home. And then it lists some of the costs. For example, his parents have told him he has to pay for the car himself. He has to spend his savings, the $500 he has, most likely, and then take out a loan. There's a little bit of information about, he has speeding tickets. His dad's credit score, his dad will co-sign. And then a little bit more. And of course, he doesn't know anything about car maintenance or car insurance, unfortunately for him. So the challenge for the students is to figure out what kind of car Alex could afford, first of all. Second of all, what kind of insurance he needs and what that would cost. And third, they have to come up with a conclusion and a recommendation. Is it worth it for him to buy a car? So in addition to the question and the background information, there's a bunch of recommended sources for kids to go to so they can get information like an auto loan calculator. And of course, providing all of these, part of the point is so that when kids are thinking for themselves, I want to buy a car, they'll think, oh, I should go look up that total cost of ownership thing on Edmunds, and I should actually compare auto insurance quotes, right? So we're trying to teach them those skills, but not by just telling them, but by having them be advisors to this hypothetical student. So I have two examples here from students. I did not share those with you just because I don't have the students' permission to share them, but I just wanted you to see the kind of work some students did. So this was done by a group of freshmen, and you can see they've assigned themselves or each other. Leah's assigned Oliver this slide, but this was their presentation. So when they were presenting this to my class, this group was the only group that had done this particular case study. The other kids had done different case studies. So they get up and they explain, here's Alex's story. They actually decided that it would be worth stopping and actually defining these terms for their classmates in case their classmates didn't know them. In particular, they thought it was important to explain the types of car insurance to their classmates, which I thought was pretty cool. I'm not sure their classmates all remembered them, but I'm sure these kids remembered them after learning them and teaching them to others. Then they gave us a rundown of Alex's financial situation. They actually found where they said he lived, which was interesting. They kind of made that up themselves. I mean, it was in Kansas City, but they actually found a place and said, here's where we think he lives. They gave us his little personal story and some notes about what he wants with a car. And then they go through and they, give us the cost benefit analysis, and they actually quantify the cost of ownership, right? Like, what's the insurance going to cost? What's the gas going to cost, right? If there's anything relating to maintenance or health issues, right? It could be more expensive. This is just his parents' cars. And then they go through and they give us 3 options that they found online. So they found this Ford Focus, and they found this Dodge Avenger, and they found this this Kia Sorento. And they do a little comparison of the 3 cars, and then they gave us some information about different insurance possibilities. And then they made their recommendation, and they said, yes, he should get a car. They quantified it. They explained how much money he'd be able to earn, how it compares to what he's earning now. And they also picked out a particular car. They said the Ford Focus is the best one. It was the lowest price of the options. It fits his budget. They found him a kind of insurance. So it was very comprehensive, as you can see. And these kids had, I think, like 4 class days to work on this. I'm just going to show you real quick this other one, just because this group, I mean, they both groups, I think, in this case, concluded that he should buy the car. This group did a little more kind of a slicker slideshow. So these kids were a little bit older. So very similar. They went through and gave the financial details. They again gave us some car comparisons. You'll notice they picked a lot more expensive cars, this group. I'm not sure why. They weren't as thrifty as the first group. But they did a nice table. They told us what car they thought he should buy. And again, they went through and gave us the car insurance factors. So it's just an example of what students can do when they have this open-ended problem to solve. I'm going to show you a quick video of the students actually working on this. And I'll point out a couple of the groups and kind of what they're doing. Insurance plan should I select?
He would have to pay $5,000, so that's actually still a lot. And he has a $15. He has to pay $15.
So those kids were looking at what health insurance plan a person should pick. And when I stopped by and chatted with them, and they said, being an adult just seems really hard. They were really kind of overwhelmed by it. And this group, I don't know if you can see what he's got on his computer there, but they were actually planning a wedding. So they were trying to make a low budget wedding, and the boys wanted to cut a lot more. They didn't think they needed a videographer, and the girls were letting them know that a videographer was essential.
He already calculated.
So anyway, it's just kind of a fun little look at my classroom when the kids were working on these. Oops, sorry, that did not work. I'm going to get past that. This is a quote from one of the students who was involved in that. He said, it was more interesting than other class assignments. You're thinking of the solution on your own, and there's not a defined correct answer. And I really think that captures what makes this so engaging for kids. They're still learning a ton of content, right? They're learning all these things we want them to learn, but they're thinking about it on their own, rather than just trying to come up with a predetermined answer. And this is just a little glimpse of some of the research on problem-based learning. I really, of course, love this, right? But I did read a lot, and I tried to read on every case, pros and cons. And I really like the fact that students seem to be motivated by their own curiosity when presented with interesting problems. And I've definitely seen that play out in my class. So I put a little slide in for questions. If anyone has a question, I'm happy to try to answer it, but if not, we can have time for questions at the end. I see one. Do you think COVID has increased the boredom? Absolutely. Yes, Rita. I think COVID and hybrid or virtual, yes, it's made it a lot more difficult because it's so much easier to check out, for one thing, and because like all of us, it's just not as engaging to be behind a screen. Even if you're going to have them do some sort of activity like this, you put them in, small Zoom groups and let them discuss it. It's not the same as being there with someone else and arguing and discussing. So it's, yes, it's definitely a problem. Yes, that would be great with a used car project. Yep. Opening new tabs. Yep. Multitasking. It's so easy for them to not focus. So yeah, I did all the research and wrote the book before COVID, and but I think it's definitely even more true now. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is authentic tasks. So authentic tasks, this is probably my perspective, maybe the hardest one to implement, just because it's like, okay, what are we going to have them do, right? So authentic tasks are things where students get the opportunity to seek change, to share their voices, to educate or inform others, and I just added on the end here because this is what I'm going to show you, in some cases to actually launch a venture. So when I do broader workshops that aren't so focused on personal finance, I talk about a lot of things like, I'm trying to even think, but sort of lost my train of thought there. But making books for children, or speaking to people at a senior center, or getting involved in a political campaign. I've had so many students in the past in other classes do things like join a protest or something like that, start a protest, start a petition. But thinking about this from the perspective of personal finance, I kind of landed on the starting a venture one. So a few examples. One would be just taking what they've learned to educate others. And I think this is such an important one, right? I mean, if you have anybody in your family who's an older adult living alone, there's that constant, right? Constant, the scams, the phone calls, and older adults living alone, happy to get a phone call and think this person's calling to really engage with them. So involving kids in that, in helping educate people in their community about scams, is a great way to get them involved. Another is, for example, having the kids research issues in their community and actually stand up and say, we want to see this policy changed. I put this example because obviously housing, mortgages, that sort of thing is a huge personal finance issue. And there are still cases we hear about where people are, denied loans or given worse credit or given a lower estimate on the value of their house due to discriminatory practices. So having students learn about that, or for example, that John Oliver video, right? Having them see how these fees that may seem insignificant to a middle-class high school student can be so burdensome to other people, and taking action on that is something that would count and would be important for an authentic task. Another one that some of my students did this year, I'll show you an example, is helping students think about careers. So some of my students in my in an after-school group that I have started this Pathify because we were talking at the beginning of the school year. They did some potential customer interviews, really just interviewing like friends, family, neighbors, about what are problems that they see, what are some things they would like to address. And what they came up with was, it's really hard when you're in high school, especially right now with COVID, to think about what you want to do in the future, right? It just feels so overwhelming. For many kids, it feels so discouraging, right? Like what is the future even going to look like? And how do I know what I want to do? Like, do I want to go to college and say I'm going to major in a particular thing when I don't even know what that's like or what that job would be like? So these kids came up with the idea of matching high school students with professional mentors. They use the term mentor. You can see it on the website. That might be overstated. It's not necessarily somebody that they're going to have an ongoing relationship with. It's more the opportunity to match them with somebody. If I think, I want to be a traveling nurse, well, we're going to put you in a conversation with a traveling nurse. Or I think I want to be an archaeologist. Okay, we're going to connect you with an archaeologist. So the idea is to match students with a professional who's working in a particular career field and so they can have a conversation, like a 30 to 45-minute conversation over Zoom. So taking advantage of that opportunity to use the technology we have now. So it's pretty early on. They've set this up so that students can request what careers they're interested in, or even just what kinds of things they like to do. They don't have to have a career name. They can say, I like writing, I like making videos, whatever. And then they are recruiting people to be mentors, to be matches. They set up the conversation, and then both parties have an opportunity to review afterwards. And both the students and the mentors are able to request either a structured conversation or an open-ended conversation. So they can, if I'm a kid and I want an open-ended conversation where I can just ask questions, then I can get matched with somebody who's okay with that. If I would prefer to have a set list of questions, they will do that as well. So again, they're in the pretty early stages here, but they are, I like that. Don't have the faintest idea, start the search. But they're recruiting mentors, they're recruiting students. They've had a few of these sessions and recorded them and interviewed the people who participated so they can figure out how to make that better. But it's really cool to see them do this, right? To take this on themselves and say, hey, this is a big problem. It falls under the umbrella of personal finance and this career search thing, and we want to do something about it. So I think it's really empowering for kids to be able to take something like this on themselves and be able to pursue their own questions, right? Take on their own, wherever it is that it leads them. And I think that is really, really important when you're thinking about these tasks, is helping students realize that personal finance is really all about them. Not that there aren't other things to be learned, but a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to teach a class for really struggling students in my school who'd been identified for a variety of reasons that they might struggle with a regular econ class. And so I designed the course basically around this bullseye idea that the first 6 weeks would be all about being a consumer, right? Understanding like cost benefit analysis when it comes to deciding what to buy and where to buy things and how not to get taken advantage of. And then the next 6 weeks would be about how to be an earner. Like where are you going to earn money from? What are you going to do? What kinds of skills do you need? How can you achieve what you want to achieve? And then the last part is about being a citizen, and not like a super broad perspective on but they weren't learning the 3 branches of government, but they were learning about policies that affect you and your personal finance. So things like, minimum wage laws or interest rate policies or trade policies, anything that's going to have an effect on you, understanding how those things affect you and getting involved. So it ended up being a pretty successful experiment. All the kids passed the class, so that was exciting. But also they really liked it, and they especially liked when they felt like they had an opportunity to learn things that were actually going to help them, right? Like how not to get taken advantage of. That was the biggest thing, is that they didn't want to feel taken advantage of. And they really, in the end, wanted to learn things about like how taxes work, right? Because they wanted to make sure they understood where their money was going. So that was helpful for making it engaging. I'm going to go back to the specifics of this launching a venture. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think that launching a venture or launching like a civic action group is a very similar thing, is a great way to get kids involved in authentic tasks, because it helps them feel like they're doing something meaningful, right? So many times I've had kids say afterwards, like, this feels like the only thing I really learned this semester, right? Was working on this, as opposed to, especially last year, right? When they were at home and they were on Zoom and they didn't feel really connected to the school. So they want to be treated like adults. They want to be trusted with solving problems. They want to learn things that are going to be relevant, and getting them engaged in entrepreneurship, or again, some sort of civic action, really helps with that. And just 2 things to kind of think about if you do this. One is to really get the kids to think about broadly about what kinds of problems they want to address. So you can frame this in terms of, within a personal finance context. But I think it's really important for them to go out and talk to people and find out, what is frustrating to you? And maybe it's what is frustrating to you about the car buying process, right? What did you complain about? What do you wish you could improve? And really listening to their parents, their neighbors, and their friends and their teachers, so they can start identifying problems that way. And then, and this fits really well with the personal finance piece too, thinking about their own skills and how what they know and what they can do, how those skills overlap, right, with the problem that they want to solve. So in the case of these particular students who are doing Pathify, they know a little bit about, creating a website, but they want to learn a lot about creating a website, right? They don't know much about reaching out to the adult mentors. That's like super new and scary to them, but they want to learn how to do it. So thinking about what are the skills I already have, and then what are things I actually hope I'll learn in this process, and helping kids figure out how that fits in with their project. Okay, and then these are just some pictures of kids actually working on these. This is after they've done some customer interviews and they're putting all their ideas on Post-it notes. I will tell you that I've had a lot of kids come up with some pretty silly ideas that turned out to be good ideas. So you really never know what's going to be actually a good idea or something that's really going to take off. So I'm really optimistic about the kids doing Pathify. Okay, again, a little bit of research here. This is all from one research study that is cited in the book. And you can see that it's making a lot of reference to high stakes tests, right? Mandated tests, state tests, high stakes test. And I really like reading this research study because they were really focused on this. If we use authentic pedagogy, if kids are doing these kinds of projects, does it mean they aren't going to learn as much? And what they found is no, that when kids are doing these kind of projects, it in fact causes higher levels of achievement. Because they start to feel like what they're learning is meaningful, and they start to see, that whole question, when am I ever going to need this? When am I ever going to need this? Well, when you're doing work that requires the skills that you're learning, you start to see when you need it. And so just that motivational piece was huge. Okay, I will pause again just for a moment to see if there's any questions here. Okay, we'll come back for more questions at the end if need be. We still have simulation and discussion, which is so much content for one evening. Simulations, I broke down into 4 types. What I call the generic role simulation, which is what I do a lot of in my econ classes. So have an auction, do a production simulation, you're making sandwiches or you're making paper links. Nobody has any specific role, right? You're not assigned to be a specific person, you're just all being workers. There's also the simple scripted role play, and there's a link to one of them, this Ms. Inflation one. If you haven't seen this, it's actually quite timely, although it's pretty old, but it's quite timely now because of the inflation that we're seeing. And it's the trial of Ms. Inflation. So people are testifying about all the problems that inflation has caused. The second one is the link is just to a book. It's a CE publication on globalization, and it's called Reader's Theater. Reader's Theater is about the WTO, so that the kids can, each kid just reads their part, but it turns into, sort of a play where a journalist is interviewing a bunch of people, both protesters, counter protesters, and passersby at a WTO protest, so that they can understand all the different points of view. So it's kind of fun. It's like a simulated, almost like a simulated discussion where all these different points are being made, but nobody has to actually do like a lot of research or preparation. So it really helps put a lot of ideas out on the table. And then you can have a more advanced role play, right, where you have a mock Congress. You might do that like in a history class, or do a mock trial, where kids are doing a lot of preparation, right? I didn't have great ideas for necessarily how to apply that in personal finance. But the last one, the researcher or authority simulation, there's a lot of those out there, and those often tend to be the online interactives, like Fiscal Ship, for those of you who teach econ as well, which is one where it's free and kids get to make decisions about how to balance the federal budget. And then Glacier Peak, which you probably haven't heard of, it's one that I worked with the people who developed this simulation here, and it's a simulation for basically running a business. So there's lots of things like that. I'm just going to show you this one really briefly, not because I'm trying to convince you to buy it, but just as an example. So the let's see where I have the Glacier Peak simulation here. So there's if you just go to Glacier Peak, you get like a little video and an overview, and I think that's actually my voice awkwardly, so we're not going to listen to that. This is the simulator, and if I go to my course, you can see these are all the businesses that my students started. And I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like, but you can see it tells me on here how many actions they took, how much time they spent. You can see Alex here took 1,235 actions. He spent a fair amount of time outside of class on this. Here's a couple other kids. This student, Ethan, spent 2,600, he did 2,657 moves. So some of the kids spent a whole lot of time outside of class, really, really wanting to get good at this. This Michael, made almost $1 million. He did make $1 million in his business. The market value is over $1 million. So what are they doing in this simulation? They are basically developing a product. So it walks them through everything. It tells them, here's what you need to do. You need to create a product. So you come up with a name for your product. I'm just going to call it X. You tell what type of product it is. So I'm going to come up with a software application product. You come up with a purpose. I'm just going to put an X, and a description. I'm going to put an E or an S. It tells me I have $1,000 on hand. Development cost is $20, and I haven't spent anything on a survey yet. And then I have to pick attributes. So I'm going to make this a high tech, high service product. It's going to be an average price, but it's going to be high quality. And then I have the opportunity to select a market and, see who do I want to sell my product to. So I'm going to sell my product to movers and shakers. So I have to survey them. Just 10% market fit. That's not great, right? But it walks you through the whole process of starting a business. They also go through and if you watch the little video, you'll see a little bit more of it without me taking too long to walk you through it. But they have to figure out where to put their factory. So they have to decide if they're going to put it in the US or if they're going to outsource. They have to decide who they're going to hire for different jobs, and they can hire people who are like A skill level and higher paid, or they're like B or C skill level, but they don't have to pay them as much. Yep. And then there's more. David put on other online simulations. So yeah, I love using these because they're, as you can see, I had kids going home and doing this at home, right, for fun. But they're learning so much. They come back to school and they're asking me questions about, is it better to put a factory in the US or is it better to put it somewhere else? And, what skill level employee should I want? It's like, I like when they come and ask me those questions, right? So really, a really high level, well-designed simulation can be a great learning platform for kids. And feel free, please, others, if you have other ones you use, throw them in there because there's always new ones coming out, right? And we just need to share those with each other so we know, especially if they're highly effective and they're inexpensive, right? That's what we want. Okay, I know we're close to out of time, so I'm going to skip over that research. I did love this quote from this student, Shola. He's 25 years old now, but when he was in my class, he was not a kid who always loved sitting and listening to lecture, and in fact, loved to come into class late and find reasons to leave, but boy, did he love simulations. And he just every day, are we going to do a simulation? Are we going to do a simulation? Are we going to play a game? And just learned a tremendous amount from it. Real quick, there's a number of types of discussion as well. I know that on the handout, Hillary put links to a bunch of resources about these different types of discussions. I would say, discussion is a great opportunity to just bring in some of those things when you see them, right? But identity theft. I mean, I just got a letter yesterday saying that my doctor's office, that there was a hacking incident, and somebody probably got my information, and here's the steps you can take. And so you bring it in and talk to kids about it, and what can we do about this, and how do you feel when you get a letter like this, and what are your options? So they can discuss it. They can, in some cases, argue about it, right? But it doesn't always have to be an argument. Sometimes it's just you give them an opportunity to ask questions and come up with a solution. So I know that's really brief on discussion, but I did want to leave at least like 5 minutes here at the end for any questions. And if you want me to go back and talk about discussion more, I will. But yeah, let's see. Do I think there's a better grade level? That is so hard. I mean, I think there's really pros and cons to both. If I could design a perfect world, I would probably teach it to seniors, because I think the same reason I think that a government class should be taught to seniors, because they can practice right now, right? Which is really cool and makes it a lot more meaningful. They're going through these decisions about where to go to college and what kind of job to get. On the other hand, I have taught it to freshmen, and what I've heard from some of them later is that class really helped me make better use of my 4 years. So that to me is like the compelling piece. If you can really engage freshmen, you can make them think about how they're spending their time now, as opposed to, frittering away time over 4 years that they could have made good use of later. So I don't know. Rita, can we do both? Can we teach them as freshmen and as seniors? Yeah, I don't have a great answer. I do have a friend here who teaches a math class she just retired, but she was in a rural area about an hour from where I live in Minnesota. And they had her design a math class to teach kids all these, applied math skills for personal finance to seniors who weren't, going the calculus or stats route. And it was great. I mean, she was fantastic. And she got those kids really, really interested in and really much better at applying math, because they were really interested in figuring these things out for themselves. Oh, so Lori, you have a mixed grade level. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I bet they learn so much from each other too. Especially, I bet those 9th graders are learning a lot from the 12th graders. 10, 12, that's really cool. Our school, I feel like so much is, very segmented by grade, but we also have very few kids who take just a personal finance class. I think if it was a requirement, we might have a more diverse group. Well, I'm excited to see what ideas all of you share too for implementing some of these, or things that you do as well. I know Hillary said she would let me see afterwards. I'm going to stop sharing. Hillary, is there anything else? Oh, that's cool. 8th graders too. Anything else you want to put in here in our final 2 minutes?
Yeah, I think first of all, just thank you. I will tell you that since I got to listen in earlier, I multitasked for a minute, and I came up with an entire list, literally, of, I don't know if you can see, John Oliver talking about lotteries, payday loans, income inequality, housing discrimination, bankruptcy, unemployment. So anyhow, now I know what I'm going to be watching later on as I scroll to.
And it's entertaining. It's entertaining, right? And it's interesting. Yeah, you just have to watch out for those bleeped out words, right?
Yeah, exactly. I have to do a more bleeped out version in class, but. Anyhow, thank you so much. I have so enjoyed this. It's always good to just be challenged by folks to think about different ways to format and to structure, because I think a lot of times we have ways of doing things, or maybe to someone's point earlier, maybe we have a lesson that we've used before, but it can go one next level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my part of my goal is that, not all of you feel like you have to go and reinvent the wheel, right? So, one of the things that I'm really curious from all of our participants, either in the chat now or as a follow-up later, is, what would you be interested in, if somebody were to assist, or if we were to work together and collaborate to, help you to make your lessons richer. What does that look like? What specific personal finance topics maybe is that? Or, say, I'd love to hear more about different simulations. Maybe we can invite some of the folks that host some of these different personal finance simulations to come and participate, or, present on some of the webinars. So I'd encourage all of our folks to give that some thought and maybe marinate on that a little bit. So we've had a number of folks who have been commenting. I'm going to give everybody one more last chance to be entered into that drawing by offering up some substantive feedback. But I'm going to share my screen for 1 second. I'm going to just close us out here in, hang on 1 second. So I just wanted to thank everybody again for participating, and it's great to have everybody joining us. I know you guys have a lot of options about how you spend your evening, so thank you again for being here with us, Martha, for sharing your expertise and being such a great resource for all of our educators. We very, very much appreciate it. So thank you all so much.